What up, tube? What's going on, YouTube? So, hi, we're back with another fantastic painting. I did want to show you guys real quick from the last session that I did. Last session. This is the vinyl, of course, here. And I'll end up putting a thing of, what do you call that stuff? 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, I am so tired this morning. I'll end up putting some resin on top of this. I do have a little bit of like scratch up here. I don't want to call it scratch, but you know, some spots where the paint wasn't perfect up there, but you know, it still comes out. Apparently that's my art style, is the imperfections. So, you know, I do like it. It has a little bit of the shimmer in there. I can see with the blue that did kind of come through for that. It's color shifting, like a silvery blue. And then this one was the black canvas, which I really do like. I'm trying to remember what all I did with this black canvas, but I know I did a swipe on top of everything, you know, with the colors. But I do really like this one here. So I'm thinking I do want to, at some point, put canvases up on sale, some of the smaller canvases that I have, just because, you know, they do start to take up space also, and they're pretty easy to ship, smaller ones. Which, yeah, that's what I'll kind of get into here. I'm very grateful for everyone who has been, you know, supportive of the art journey, as I've mentioned over these past weeks, months, years, and especially lately, because you know I haven't really been in the happiest of moods, as we can all tell. A lot of which being from the situations outside. So, you know, if I can share these things with others, you know, it's helpful for me and hopefully helpful for others, you know, to have these things shared. And, you know, and part of that helpfulness, you know, with myself and others, yeah, if I can do it in a way where, you know, other people are able to come out and see this art, then, you know, it becomes a good thing. So, like I said, I'm very grateful for that, very grateful for those who, you know, did take a part in my little mini art sale here this past couple weeks, or this past week. I just happened to kind of luck out and have one friend who reached out, you know, asking about a piece, and then, you know, they made that there, and just as I got everything together for them, a couple of others reached out, you know. So I ended up actually yesterday making a trip to the post office, dropped off 3 pieces there, you know, that were for sale. And just as I got back from the post office, had a 4th, you know, person, you know, ringing for a sale there. So, you know, it's a good time. Yeah, like I said, I'm very grateful for that. Very grateful for everyone who has been supportive along this journey. You all mean the world to me here, so thank you. I am just basically throwing colors down on the canvas right now just to see what happens with them. You know, no real rhyme or reason, as I like to say, with these things. I'm in a kind of a cool mood right now, I guess. You know, yellow is maybe the only non-cooler, you know, per se, that I've added so far, and you know, we'll see just what happens. I'm almost at the point where it's time to start mixing some new paints. Pretty much at the end of these bottles here, I do have some new paints that, you know, I can mix up here pretty soon, and it's just, you know, hey, when do I want to do that? Might start working on some of that this week. Like I said, I do have the paints, you know, kind of ready to go to my house. And I'm going to have the time, really, you know, to do these things this week. just have some extra days off, per se. I did end up getting a kind of resolution on the work situation. They're gonna give me 3 days basically at home to kind of just work on things for myself, which will be good. And, kind of work on my own being, work on my own, mental capacity and all that, just good, I'm saying it's good. So, I'm gonna take the 3 days and it's one of those situations where we can, it's how we look at things. And I can either look at it as a 3-day punishment, of, you were a bad boy, here's, time away, whatever. Or, find the positive joy in these things and say, hey, you know what, this happened, great. How are we going to build from it? Here's some time where I can work towards, bettering myself. So that's pretty much where I'm at with this here is, taking the time for betterment. I just keep putting colors in the middle of this. Yeah. So as I said, that's what I'm kind of working towards here. So, taking the time, kind of bettering myself off of that there. Do I need gas? Hopefully gas goes in there this time. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So today's the 15th of June. It actually gives me Juneteenth off, which is, it's supposedly a federal holiday right now. We'll see how long, Hitler Jr. allows this to be, but right now it's federal holiday, so a little pink in there. I doubt if anything happens with that, a little bit anyway. I'm just hitting it with the air bubble, heat gun now before I do anything else. Just kind of pop some air bubbles. And something that, as I'm going to say this here, we end up a lot of times where we are, so hurt by what happens in our areas that we forget to see a lot of beauty in things. I say we because I am just as guilty of this. I will allow at times the doom and gloom to kind of catapult into me. So, if I could not do that and I can find joy, find happiness, and find peace in, what's going on in my life, then it's a good thing, right? Right? It's a good thing if I can find some joy and peace and happiness and love and good times and great oldies. So when I was able to do that, this weekend, and go to the post office and drop off pieces, I don't think they are going to know it yet, but I gave them a couple of surprises, each one of the buyers there. Mostly because these are people from my life also. Family, friends. One of these actually is a person that I've known since first grade. And part of my sort of depression, I'd say, over these past few months is this feeling that I've been disconnected from sort of lifelong friends, people that I've known forever. And a good bit of it is, I've been here in the city a bit over a year now, and I really haven't spent a lot of time with any friends. I haven't really had any connection time. I've seen a couple people in passing, you know, like here, there, and I've had a couple people drop by to buy some art that I've known over the 20-year break from being in the city. But when I say a couple, I do mean two. And I've had a couple of others that I've just kind of seen here or there, but I haven't really had like a good amount of, friend time per se. So that's becomes a bit of a pain for me there. It's not having a refill. I don't know why I swiped it and then decided to blow it out. Ooh, don't do that. And then decided to spin everything. Not sure why I did any of that, but I did it. Great. I do kind of like that though. Kind of like this, where I have the negative space up here, and then more of the color down in here. I do like how it's looking right now. Just the swipe wasn't really feeling me at the point in time, so I think I would do like, let's bloom this instead. I'm just gonna hit the button again. But just to have time where I can connect with people has been a plus, and something to be grateful for, and to have the people in my life who I've been recognizing of this. I've had a lot of people kind of reach out, hey, are you okay? I've seen your post. Don't let these folks get you down, but as I was saying, there hasn't really been a lot of connecting time, and especially with people that I've known for decades. And then, with everything happening outside, some of the folks that I have connected with, I haven't really felt a connection with, because we now find ourselves sitting on opposite ends, and that could be a bit much there, as we all know. So, it just becomes a thing of finding little bits of joy and peace and happiness and everything. And that's something that, I've really have wanted to have in my life, is joy and peace and happiness. And, like I said, I was able to share some of these pieces with some others, one of them being a person I've known since first grade. I'm very grateful for that, and for her, and for everyone who's been supportive here. So thank you. And it becomes a thing where, as I keep kind of pushing through, finding that sort of happiness and remembering that sort of peace there. Things have been, dark enough in my life, to the point where there's a few nights where I remember going to bed and pretty much crying myself to sleep, with the tears, saying, okay, God, just don't wake me up this morning, just let me die in my sleep, and then almost waking up that next day like, darn it, didn't get my wish. And, sometimes the best answer that you can get is no. So, as I wake up today, I'm very grateful for all of the nights and mornings that God said, no, hey, it's not your time yet. You still have work to do. There's still places for you to be. And, just being able to come out, share this artwork with everyone. Remember, light will break through darkness, always. Whatever darkness is going on, light will break through that. That's why I put the glow paints in here, so that I can have some light that breaks through, even in the dark times. So, thank you all for joining. I'm going to take this smaller canvas off and do a vinyl on top of that, because I got some other things to explain in my little, we call these journal pages here, basically. So yeah, till next time, deuces.